Hi everyone, and welcome to the sixth lesson in our Lord of the Flies, or I should say the Lord of the Flies series, GCSE revision series. If you are sitting an essay on the Lord of the Flies this year for your GCSEs, or next year or the year after, you'd like to get a bit of a leg up on key quotes, characters, themes, context, model answers, all that good stuff that will help you with your exams. This is a great video for you and a great series for you. In the previous 5 weeks, we've gone through the character of Ralph, Jack, Piggy, Simon, and the Beast. If you haven't checked those videos out, I highly recommend them, as I'm just trying to pour out all of my knowledge for each of the characters from being an English teacher for over 10 years. Today's lesson, we're going to be looking at civilization versus savagery. So feel free to follow along with the slideshow or pause the video for a second just to grab a pen and paper or start up a new tab, Google Doc, Word Drive, OneDrive, whatever you use to take some notes as you go through this with me. So civilization versus savagery. So we'll talk about how it plays out in the novel. We'll talk about why it is significant. And then we'll go through some quotes for it. And then we will finish, as always, with a little paragraph on it. So I just realized that I forgot to create a slide for that paragraph, so I apologize for that. Let me just do that super quick. You get a little behind the scenes now of how it all happens. It's really simple. These videos are something I do on top of a full schedule of tutoring each week and teaching English. So unfortunately, I don't have like a huge amount of time to make the videos amazing and crazy effects and stuff. But what I do in every video is I try and give you the information you need. So hopefully if you stick with me, even if the videos aren't like flashy and crazy and stuff, you will at least be like, okay, this dude knows his stuff a little bit. And hopefully you won't say dude because that's embarrassing. But yeah, anyway, so let's get started with civilization. So at the beginning of the novel, the boys all have an embedded sense of the rules of Western society. But over the course of the novel, that unravels. That's the first place to start when you think about civilization versus savagery. So they start very civilized and slowly savagery enters in more and more as they forget their identity more and more, right? And there are lots of catalysts for this. Piggy, for example, never truly loses his civilization till the day he dies. Ralph doesn't fully, but he loses some of it. There are animalistic moments like when he manages to spear the pig and he wants the approval of everyone. All of them lose their civilization for a little bit when we think about killing Simon. Even Piggy stabs Simon, right? So there are some moments like this that are very significant in that decay. But the decay starts fairly early on in the novel, so we get some sense of that. One of the other ways, other than their actions and the way they speak to each other and the breakdown of the assemblies and the usurping of the leadership from Ralph to Jack, all of that stuff, that also marks the descent into savagery, is at the beginning, the boys were all neatly dressed in school uniforms of different schools that they attended and stuff. Whereas at the end, they're all just, half naked tribes people, painted up with like loads of paint and stuff. So that again, that physical change is meant to also mark their descent into savagery. So those are a couple of things. A lot of the beginning mistakes they make are quite accidental. So at near the very beginning, when they burn down a load of trees, that is accidental. There's the boy with the mulberry colored face, birthmark on his face. His death, I genuinely do see as accidental. I don't think that they were trying to kill that boy, but he is killed, unfortunately, nevertheless. Or technically, we never see that he's dead, but he never comes back and he's never heard of again. So I think probably he's dead, sadly, right? But that accidental stuff becomes more and more deliberate. So burning up the trees, fully accidental. Painting themselves up is deliberate, but they don't maybe realize the consequence of painting themselves up. So it's after Jack paints himself up for the first time, he puts on the reds and the whites and the blacks and so on, the different colored paints on his face and body, that he embodies this new version of himself, which is after that point, that's when he kills the first pig. Then they kill Simon. That's somewhat accidental, maybe, but at the same time, it's pretty scary, the fact that if they'd just taken a second to look at what they were kicking and punching and stabbing, they would have seen it was a boy, not a monster. But this shows the paranoia that's been growing in them and stuff as well. Then there's the killing of Piggy. That is pretty deliberate from Roger. And then it's very, very deliberate from Jack, when Jack's reaction is, this is what you get. He doesn't show any remorse. So they go from being scared to kill a pig. There's the reference to the awful blood and so on. They would be scared of that, to trying to being fine that Piggy gets killed. Roger obviously deliberately tries to kill Piggy as well, because he puts the stick or whatever and the leverage to push that rock down, which kills Piggy, because it's a big boulder that falls down a cliff edge that hits Piggy and kills him. Breaks the conch. Obviously the conch is a symbol for civilization and order, and that gets smashed as well when Piggy dies. This is pretty deliberate. And then the final bit where they're attempting, notice that I've said they've attempted to murder Ralph, right? So you can argue the killing of Simon, it wasn't premeditated. They didn't intend to kill Simon. It was not premeditated. They didn't, Roger maybe murdered Piggy, but I don't think the rest of the boys premeditated to kill Piggy. Whereas when they go out to hunt Ralph, that is premeditated. What that means is they have previously planned to do this. So they're actually going out to murder Ralph. They're not killing like in a moment of accident or anything, or something that happened that was somewhat out of their control. No, by Ralph, they're preparing for it. They have a plan of how they're going to do this. Right. So obviously by the end, there's just destruction and savagery. And then the final thing that I didn't actually add in here, but I think is quite important, is that there is this sort of central savagery even in the civilized. So at the very end, obviously, the naval officer comes to rescue the boys from the island and so on. But the backdrop of that is that the island, around the island, there's a war going on. There's the savagery of war going on. So it's World War II. And so the reason that these army, military people are out is not to rescue the boys. That just happens to be they saw the smoke, right? It's actually much worse than that. It's that they're trying to kill each other in a war. So this little killing each other on the island is what's called a microcosm of the bigger war, World War II, which Golding was a part of. Okay, cool. So let's dive into some quotes, and then like normal, we'll do a model paragraph to finish the lesson. So sorry about the barking in the background. If you can hear that, it's not even my dog. Unfortunately, my dogs aren't barking much. They're very sweet, even though I only rescued them 2 weeks ago. But they don't bark much. This other dog, unfortunately, not my dog, does bark quite a bit, sadly. So cute dog though. Anyway, so the shameful knowledge grew in them, and they did not know how to begin confession. Okay, cool. So these quotes are a little bit out of order. The reason for that is because with themes particularly, you can look at the order of the themes. Obviously, you can look at how it grows like we just did, but it's also good to just be able to pick out quotes on how civilization and savagery go about throughout. So the shameful knowledge, this is talking about the the killing of Simon. I wouldn't say they murdered him, but they did kill him. There's manslaughter and there's murder. And in the court of law, they have very different penalties. I think normally murder is about 5 times the sentence of manslaughter. I might be wrong. It might be a bit less than that, but still there's a difference. So the shameful knowledge grew in them, and they did not know how to begin confession. The word confession also has these connotations of civilization and religion, this idea that they realized that what they did to Simon was wrong, and they want to confess of what they consider to be a sin. It's a sinful thing to kill someone, right? But they don't know how to do this. So this just shows that because they're little boys, they're young boys, really. The oldest one is only about 13. They don't know how to deal with this stuff. So we do feel a certain level of sadness, I suppose, for them in this moment. Pardon me. Oh, I'm yawning and sneezing and all sorts today. I apologize. Anyway, will you light the fire? So this one is just symbolism. So the fire being lit At the beginning, obviously, gets way out of control and they burn half the forest down and kill the boy with the mulberry birthmark on his face. But the fire being lit and the smoke and everything, this is a symbol of, obviously, as well, of hope, because the fire creates smoke, and the smoke obviously is their signal to the outside world to come and be rescued. So that's like a kind of a moment of, it's a symbolism of hope for salvation and civilization. Seems to me we ought to have a chief to decide things. So at the very beginning of the novel, they're actually pretty smart to try to create a hierarchy and order and, you know, like a sense of who does what and when and who answers to whom and when. So at the beginning, there is this hope that civilization will work out. And we're quite proud of the boys, I think, being so young, actually coming up with this idea that they need, for civilization to happen, they need a sense of democracy. But obviously this democracy eventually devolves into tyranny. Now that could be thinking about fascism and communism as well, because the novel was written in the 50s. You had fascism from Hitler. So Germany was a democratic country, so everyone had a right to vote and so on. But then when Hitler was voted in as chancellor, he basically used that power for tyranny. And then the German people didn't have anywhere near as much of a say in the war and everything else that was going on. Same with communism. So countries like Russia lost any form of democracy, and people like Stalin and Lenin and so on would just take over the country and invoke tyranny. Now, maybe that's a more accurate version of what Jack is, because the boys have, actually, no, I think Hitler is a more accurate version, sorry, because Jack ignores the democracy. No, it is communism, I'm sorry, because Jack ignores the democracy and just overthrows it. He doesn't care what the people think, which is similar to the Iron Fist, as it was called, with communism. So either way, Golding is commenting on how civilization can quickly turn to savagery, and that there is savagery in all of us. Another quote that comes to mind, which I would use in other places too, is just the darkness of man's heart. So that's another great quote for this. I'll just put that in bold. So this idea that no matter how civilized something is, a society is, or whatever, it will eventually possibly descend into chaos. The same way that the boys have been saved from their savagery by the military officer, the naval officer, and yet ultimately we know that they're being savage too. They're killing each other in a war. There was a space around Henry, perhaps 6 yards in diameter, in which Roger dare not throw. Here, invisible yet strong, was the taboo of the old life. So this is symbolism of order and civilization. So the rules are still embedded, like I said at the beginning. They have an embedded rule system from the society, the Western society, England specifically, Britain, that they follow. So when Roger is throwing these stones at this little un called Henry, he doesn't dare to throw the stone closer than 6 yards to Henry, because he is still, in his head, he feels that he'll get in trouble for harming another person. What's really interesting about that is it's the rule in his mind that stops him, because obviously later on, Roger doesn't just throw a little pebble at a boy. He leverages an enormous rock to smash and kill Piggy, right? So Roger descends into more and more evil. He's one of the characters that does become more and more evil as it goes on. And you get the sense, though, that that evil was in him from the very beginning, really, right? So there was a darkness in his heart from the beginning. And I think Golding is saying, which is a Christian worldview, and Golding was Christian, that there is a darkness in all of us, every one of us, you, me, everyone. And that in the right or wrong circumstances, that darkness will come out of us. It's a very deep question to ask yourself, actually. It's a very deep question to ask yourself. What you would be willing to do to survive, what you would be willing to do to protect your family and loved ones. Because everyone wants to believe they're the good guy or the good person, right? Everyone wants to believe that. But the truth is that actually probably there are things that, that you or I or anyone would do, given the wrong circumstances, that would be terrible. I'll give you just an example, just to make you sort of reflect on this. Imagine that someone was torturing your mother or father or loved one, sister, brother, best friend, right? And you were somewhere where there was a gun or a knife right by you, or maybe you had a gun or a knife for whatever reason, right? Now you might in your head say, oh, I'd never stab someone, or I'd never shoot someone. And in normal circumstances, obviously, hopefully that's true. You would never do that. But if someone was literally torturing your mother and you could see it and you had a way of stopping it, could you really say, looking yourself really in your eyes in the mirror, and say that you wouldn't potentially harm that person to get them off, even kill them, right? I don't know, but that's the darkness of man's heart that Golding is talking about. And it's easy to be like, no, I'd never do that. Hopefully you'll never be put in a circumstance like these boys have been put on this island. Okay, because that would be pretty bad. All right, so then the world, that understandable and lawful world, was slipping away. So this one also links to this idea, obviously, of the decay of civilization over time. And it's the imagery of slipping away. There's like this lack of control, loss of control in the image. So that's quite cool. All right, some more. Piggy was so full of pride in his contribution to the good society that he helped to fetch the wood. So these little dots, they're just to show that I skipped bits of a bigger quote. So you can always do that. The other thing you can do is you can put little changes in square brackets like this if you need to. So I think that this was they found themselves eager to take a place. So I changed it to the boys so that it's easier to understand what the quote was talking about. Anyway, Piggy was full of pride in his good contribution to the good society and helps to fetch the wood. So this is kind of an interesting quote because Piggy makes rules, but sometimes is too weak to follow them. Now, the difference is he's not following them because he wants to break the rules. He's not following them sometimes because he's literally physically weak and vulnerable, right? So we feel a little bit sorry for Piggy, but it's also interesting that he isn't strong enough to enforce civilization. And that's a big part of his character and a big part of civilization. He is too weak to enforce civilization. You know who isn't too weak? Jack. And that's why Jack overthrows the island. The boys found themselves eager to take a place in this demented but partly secure society. So this is also very interesting. It could link to Nazi Germany quite well. So there's this sort of part of humanity that we are afraid to be outside. Yeah, it's kind of a psychological situation. We're afraid to be the outsiders. So when the boys are put into a position where they have a choice of either being in Jack's tribe, where they're at least partly safe and fed meat and so on, they often choose that instead of being outsiders like eventually Ralph and Piggy. Fear that they will be killed or fear that they'll be hurt. And then obviously it doesn't help that Jack also puts in rules to harm people that are disobeying him through Roger. Roger takes joy, it seems, in hurting Sam and Eric, for example. Are we savages or what? So this is Piggy challenging the boys, and sadly it doesn't work. He then goes on to say, what's better, to have laws and agree or to hunt and kill? Again, this is use of rhetoric. It doesn't work. The boys, unfortunately, because of perhaps the darkness in their own hearts, they can't seem to do the right thing and do the good thing. They end up doing the wrong things, and it's sad. The conch exploded into 1,000 white fragments and ceased to exist. Obviously, this is symbolism of society being screwed, basically, of fully broken society. There's nothing much more that can be done once the conch is gone, because the conch was the thing that unified them and created the assemblies. So when the conch explodes, there's not really any assemblies anymore, which is, you know, and then they start to kill or go to try to murder, Ralph. On the beach behind him was a cutter, her bows hauled up and held by 2 ratings. In the stern sheets, another rating held by a submachine gun. So this is just a reminder that the civilized military that rescue them are still in the throes of the savagery of war. We'll have rules, lots of rules. So this is Jack wanting to sort of oppress people with civilization. Now that's a really interesting concept as well. Civilization. I spelled that wrong. There we go. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Google and Word spell check, whatever. So you also do have situations where rules are used as savagery. So Jack uses a messed up civilization in his tyrannical dictatorship, which is still a type of civilization though, to oppress his tribe's people. And then finally sharpen a stick at both ends. So this is symbolic of murder, the planned murder of Ralph. So Ralph is running for his life at the end, and all of the boys are literally trying to murder him. They're trying to kill him. Can you imagine anything scarier than that? Well, yeah, there are a few more scary things, but there's not much more scary than being chased around an island by people trying to kill you, I would think. So there's some good stuff for civilization. So let's think about which type of civilization we want to talk about. And I think I'm going to go with how civilization is a core and significant theme, or civilization versus savagery. There's a core and significant theme within the novel because it helps Golding to convey his views on humanity. The boys' descent into savagery marks the idea that there is a, quote, darkness in man's heart, which symbolizes the idea that there is an innate evil in all of us, whether we like to face it or not. We see this through the irony of the fact that the naval officer that rescues the boys and Ralph from murder is himself killing others in a war at that time. We see this in the quote, in the stern sheets another rating held. I'm just going to put in the stern ... held another machine gun. Held submachine gun. The imagery of war through these weapons is clear. And so Golding communicates to the audience that the so-called civilized military rescue are themselves savage in murdering and killing their enemies at this time. We're going to make this a bit smaller. This is significant because Golding was a Christian, and the Christian worldview is that every person is innately sinful and capable of great evil in the wrong circumstances. Further, Golding would have seen this savagery and evil in World War II, which he fought. All right, so there's the paragraph for you. So next week, we're going to be going through violence. Hopefully that's helpful. If you did like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or questions, please do leave them down below and I will reply. And thanks very much, everyone.